Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Vayah Vikas, we are delighted to welcome you to today's exclusive webinar on uncovering the price versus quality conundrum in medicines. At Vayah Vikas, we believe that informed choices lead to better health outcomes, and today's session is designed to help you make smarter, more cost-effective decisions about your medicines. With rising healthcare costs, many households struggle with high monthly medicine bills, especially those managing chronic conditions. This webinar will shed light on how quality and affordability can go hand in hand, empowering you to access the best medications at the best prices. Introducing our speaker, we are honored to have with us Abinash Saikia, founder and CEO of Isomeds, a serial entrepreneur. Abinash co-founded Enclouden, which was later acquired by NASDAQ listed company. He has also worked at Biocon in strategy role, holding an MBA from IIM Bangalore and a BTech from IIT Madras. Abinash is deeply committed to improving healthcare accessibility and affordability, particularly for underserved communities. Joining us and welcoming Abinash as he shares his insights on how Isomeds helps patients reduce their medicine bills by 50 to 70% while ensuring access to quality, well-priced substitutes. Let's get started. Over to you, Mr. Abinash.
Hi, everyone. Like Ashwini mentioned, I'm Abinash. Really fortunate to have this opportunity today, and thanks to Pavitra, Joyce, Robert, Ashwini, and Pavan that I had this opportunity to talk to you guys. Uh, so today it'll be I'll keep this session quite informative. I'll talk mostly about a few concepts that come around while we talk about quality and prices of medicines. Uh, in that, at the end of it, I'll give you some examples as well, how one could potentially save cost while also ensuring good quality in medicines, right? Uh, it's a huge conundrum. If you think of it, typically there are options available in the market for at various price points of different drugs. But which medicines to go for and which not is a big question typically most people have. And I'll focus on that in the conversation today. Uh, so I'll talk to you guys a little bit about what generic medicines are in general. Give you a little bit of an understanding on that. Some of you may be already aware of this, but still, for the interest of the larger audience, I'll talk a little bit of the simpler concepts. I'll talk a little bit about the Indian pharma industry just to give you some context. Also, some data on medicine price and quality, so that it'll open your eyes to a few things that are typically unseen to the regular people. We'll give you a little bit of a context about chronic conditions in India, different what demographics of chronic conditions in India in terms of costs, spend, and how many people do have chronic conditions in India, things like that. Lastly, I'll talk a little bit about how one could potentially save, let's say, between 50 to 70% on medicine bills, right? While I do this, feel free to stop me anytime if you have any question, or we could take questions at the end of the session as well. I'm happy to take them anytime you want me to take some questions. I'll just get going. Let's talk about generic medicines, right? Uh, so typically drugs, when they come to the market for the first time, they're called innovator drugs. And a process of bringing a drug to the market is a very long, complex, and expensive process. Typically these processes can take anywhere between up to 10 years and could cost like $1 billion to most companies. Most of this drug development work only happens in the West. You would, especially in India, none of the companies that you would know of in India would innovate and build new drugs, right? These processes are very complicated, and there are specialized companies which does this because there are a lot of steps that you have to follow, starting from drug discovery to going into preclinical trials to 3 levels of clinical trials in human beings. It's a very complicated process. Uh, so typically that is how a new product comes to the market. It's a very long, complex, and expensive process. However, over time, what regulators have figured is that, if you have a single company delivering products in the market, they become a monopoly, right? And when a product of a company becomes a monopoly, they have the advantage to price it as they like it. And most companies in the past would essentially keep the price of the products very high, and that has affected customers' patience over a long period of time. In 1984, a law came in the US called Hatch-Waxman. Through that law, what was regularized uh, was that different companies also could potentially sell the same product in the market after a particular duration of exclusivity for the original product innovator. So subsequently, when a new product comes to market, which is kind of a copy of the original product, the process to get them regulated, get them approved through the regulatory agencies is not so difficult. Typically they just have to show that the product is exactly same as the innovator product. So these products which are not innovator drugs but drugs which are copies of this and could be brought to market over a period of time are generally called generic drugs, right? While generic drugs are allowed in the market, pharmaceutical companies would have to show a lot of data to be allowed to be marketing these kind of products. Broadly, there are various aspects to this, but I'll touch upon a couple of aspects here, which uh, one is called pharmacoequivalence, right? What it means is that a generic drug has to show equal amount of the same active pharmaceutical ingredient in the generic drug as compared to the innovator drug, and that is called pharmacoequivalence. It has the same active pharmaceutical ingredient in both the products, right? The second important data that the generic drug has to show to the regulators is something called bioequivalence. What bioequivalence generally means is the drug when ingested into the body, right? Once somebody swallows a drug, it goes and affects the body in certain ways. It goes and kind of goes into the bloodstream over a period of time. That that dissolution process, how does that happen? And the rate at which that dissolution absorption happen in the body, that also has to be similar to the ones in the innovator drug, the original product that was in the market. So typically, these are two very important aspects that a generic drug has to show to regulators before they are allowed to the market, right? And what this essentially ensures is that the generic drug is essentially the same drug and it affects the body in the same way as the innovator drug. This is a very broad concept, right? And this is how the drug companies have sprung up over a period of time. And like I mentioned, over a period of time, now most pharma companies only produce or only develop generic products. Especially in India, all the pharma companies in India are mostly into generic drugs, and they would essentially market a similar product that is already in the market, do testing in a way that they can show equivalence of the drug to the original product, and they are then allowed to market these products in the market. Now, talking about two generic brands, right? Suppose there are two generic brands of the same drug. Two generic brands, let's say brand A and brand B, right? They will essentially be the same product. They will have the same composition. They will have same strength. What I mean by strength here is, I'll just give example. Let's say all of us take paracetamol or Dolo 500 maybe when somebody has fever, right? Now that paracetamol is the composition, and paracetamol and that 500 milligram is the strength, right? So if you look at brand A versus brand B, that they have the same composition and the same strength of the same composition. They will have the same form. If a medicine is solid, let's say it's a capsule or a tablet, right? The other generic brand also will be the same. They have the same therapeutic effect, in the body. They will have the same effect, as well as if there are some side effects, these also will have the same effect because they are essentially the same medicine. For both of these brands, typically their testing standards will be the same because when you uh, get these products regulated in the market, you'd have to show the regulators a lot of data, and the testing standards for that those data are exactly the same. They will need the exact same regulatory approval. I mean, in the US, typically, one has to file FDA, ANDA process. In India, DCGI has a process for regulation, and the same process is followed for different brands for this for generic medicines. Price can be different here, right? Although everything else is same, different depending on how somebody is branding this product, the price can be very different. And broadly, this is how generic medicines work. And two different brands of the generic medicine will essentially be the same medicine in a way. Talking about the Indian pharma market, right? Which Indian pharma market is quite peculiar if you compare it to most of the global advanced markets, the developed markets, right? If you look at globally, there are original drugs, and then you have innovative drugs, and then generics. And generics are not allowed to be branded. Generics are like, for example, if you go to France or Germany, a paracetamol tablet will be called a paracetamol tablet. It will not be called a Dolo or a Crocin like it is called in India. So they're all, there are no branding of generic products. Once the product goes out of patent, when generic products come to the market, they have to be branded with the generic name of the product rather than some brand. But in India, somehow pharma companies have built the market in a way that there are branded generics, right? So if you look at it, about 87% of the Indian market is all branded generics, right? All the medicines that we take today, like I gave the example in case of paracetamol, there's Dolo, there's Crocin, there's Calpol. All of these are different brands. They're all generic products, but different brands. So most of the medicines that you and I or anybody in India take, they're all generic products, but some kind of branding is done on them. How products are branded in medicines you're typically not allowed to market your products to consumers directly. This is regulatory not allowed in India. That is why branding is done through the doctors. So these pharma companies will have large medical reps who would, large teams of medical reps who would essentially go visit different doctors and tell them about their products. And of course, there are other methods of them influencing the doctors as well. And they would essentially, brand these products so the doctors write these particular medicine brand names in their prescription. So 87% of the market in India is branded generics. Only 3% is innovative drugs, right? And around 10% of the market is branded. These are sold not with a brand name, but with the generic name itself. And mostly these are sold uh, in different kind of charity setups and government setups and places like that. So this is what the Indian market is. Now, with this kind of a setup in India, where there are branding of generic products, there are big pharma companies with big pharmaceutical medical representative teams influencing doctors. Uh, what has happened is there is a very low awareness about generic medicine in India. So most people, if you talk to, they would potentially not know that there are other brands of the exact same medicine that they are taking available in the market. And that has created a pseudo monopoly, right? So whatever the doctor writes, essentially, the brand name that the doctor writes, people will essentially go and buy that exact same brand product, right? Because they don't really know that there are alternatives possible, and there's a lack of trust in the market as well. So people buy that exact same brand that doctor writes, and that has created a pseudo monopoly, which has resulted in a very disparate set of pricing in medicine products in India. I've put a few examples here. These are some of the most prescribed medicines in India. If you look at metformin, 500 milligram, which is a diabetes medicine, there are about 160 brands in India, right? If you look at the price of the product, the highest price brand in India would cost around 4 rupees per tablet, right? And the cheapest brand in India would cost around 0.6 rupees per tablet, right? The difference is significant, like you see. If you go to amlodipine 5 milligram, there are about 299 brands in India. If you look at it, the difference here is much higher. The more expensive brands, the most expensive brand costs around 14 rupees 7 paise per tablet. The least expensive brand costs around zero point 0.3 rupees. So there's a huge difference in the pricing that of the different brands of these products. Similarly, with atorvastatin 10 mg, which a lot of heart condition patients take. Paracetamol 500 again, you have around 149 brands of that. Omeprazole is a acidity medicine that a lot of people take. They are also, the lowest price is around 0.3 rupees, whereas the highest price brand is around 15.6 rupees. So what we see here is, this pseudo monopoly in the market, where, people are not really aware of the fact that there are other brands available. People are essentially buying the exact same brand that doctors are writing in the prescription, and it has really created a huge disparity on the prices of the products. And what we typically see is that the market leaders are usually priced at a premium. The big pharma companies which have large pharmaceutical reps teams, they would essentially be able to influence the doctors better, and they are also accordingly able to price their products significantly higher in the market. So this is a glimpse of how pricing happens in India and how there's so much of a disparity in the pricing in the market. Talking about quality, while there are so many brands available in the market, and there's the quality is so different, the quality again can be a concern. In general, the quality of all of these brands should be the same, like I mentioned in the concepts in the previous slides, right? Typically, they have gone through the same regulatory process. They have gone through similar testing standards. Typically, the quality should be same. But of course, in India, there are a lot of enforcement of these quality standards is not so good. And what that has resulted in is that there is always some quality issue in medicines, and there have been different studies done on this. I'm quoting a study by Government of India only, which was it's a pretty large study done across states in India. What is typically seen is that typical retail outlets, if these are pharmacies that you and I buy medicines from, right? There are typically 3 to 4% medicines which are what is called not of standard quality. These are medicines which have less quantity of the active pharmaceutical ingredient or some issue like that. In the government supply chain, that number is quite higher. If it is on an average around 10%. Some of the states really do poorly in this. A lot of northeastern states, you would see that they do poorly. You would see that Uttar Pradesh does really poorly as well. Gujarat does poorly as well. Uh, and that trend continues, right? In that, the amount of spurious medicines is not so much, but that also has there's a difference in the spurious medicine uh, percentage in the regular retail outlets versus the government supply chain. In the regular outlets, it is 0.023%, whereas in the regular government supply chain, it is 0.59. So the point here is that, while there are so many brands, quality can be a concern as well, right? And quality, but if quality is not, and quality can be a concern from the places that we buy as well. It can be concern in the regular pharmaceutical retail chains as well. And similarly, that concern is slightly more enhanced, not slightly, but significantly more enhanced in the government supply chain. And this is a data to be looked at and to be understood, so that we can keep this in mind when we kind of go get our medicines. Uh, Now let me talk a little bit about chronic condition patients in India, right? Uh, so in general, in India, the number of chronic condition patients are growing really highly, right? If you look at it, hypertension, diabetes, and cardiovascular conditions are really affecting a huge set of population in India, mostly people at advanced ages. Most seniors would have any of these, most of these conditions, some of these conditions. There are about 242 million people in India with hypertension, diabetes, around 75 million people. About 67 million people have cardiovascular conditions, and those are the big items in this, right? And anybody who have diabetes is more likely to have either hypertension or cardiovascular condition. With arthritis and asthma also, there are number of patients which is growing significantly these days. But this is how India is. India is slowly getting into a state where these chronic conditions are becoming really, really uh, lethal for the population. And for these chronic conditions, uh, and I mean, this is for me to really talk about why savings on medicines is important, why it is important for us to really understand some of these concepts so that we can really propagate this and help people reduce their burden on medicine. Now, when we look at this chronic condition patients, what also needs to be looked at is what people typically spend on medicine versus income in Indian households. If you look, I mean, if you look at it, there are about 300 million households in India, right? And if you break it down, about 200 million of these households have at least one chronic condition patients, because most households will have some seniors, and beyond the age of 60 or 55, typically most people have one or the other chronic condition. Out of this 200 million, there are about 120 million people who would have million households which will have either multiple patients with chronic condition or multi-morbidity, somebody with multiple chronic conditions, right? And the expected household spend on medicine for these 120 million households is anywhere between 3 to 10,000 rupees a month, right? And that is a significant spend for most Indian households. uh, I have plotted the income levels of people on the right hand side here. If there are about 80 million households, out of these 120 millions, there are about 80 million of these 120 million households have an income level of less than 40,000 rupees a month, right? And the expected spend on medicine as a percentage of household income is more than 15%, which is significant, which is really high for most households. For about 25 million of these households, the household income per month is between 40 to 80,000 a month. For them again, the cost of medicine is like more than 7.5% of their household income. Now, these are significant percentages, and most of these families either get pushed into financial hardship, or a lot of people just go into non-adherence, which essentially leads to disability or death, right? Early disability or death for most people. Uh, so it's a very severe situation in India. For most of India, it's a quite severe situation, and it's important that we create more and more awareness about medicines, and how people could potentially reduce their burden on medicine significantly with different methods. Now, what we do, I mean, now we spoke about few things, right? We spoke about generic medicines. We spoke about the Indian context in general, how many people have diabetes or some of these chronic condition, what kind of spends do they have. Now let's talk about how one could potentially choose high quality affordable brands, right? And like I mentioned, for most medicines in India, there are hundreds of brands available in the market, right? And all of these brands, by definition, have same composition, strength, form, therapeutic effect, and have gone through same testing standards and regulatory have gotten the same regulatory approval. So they are essentially the same medicine. Now, how do we choose among these hundreds of brands that we can really find something that is good quality but is also affordable, right? So what we do in this case is uh, we kind of look for genuine brands from top pharmaceutical companies, right? And this is just a proxy, by the way. It is not 100% foolproof method. But top pharmaceutical companies typically have better quality standards and better adherence to these standards, right? These bigger pharma companies like Cipla, Sun Pharma, these bigger pharma companies have better standards, and we kind of use that as a proxy to say that the quality of products from these companies will be better, right? And we also choose, along with that, we choose products which are significantly cheaper on the pricing, and significantly 50+% financial savings in general. So if we choose brands like this in the market, we are able to essentially offer healthcare at a significantly cheaper cost, right? Especially the medicine cost can come down anywhere between 50 to 70% for most prescriptions. Now the big question here is, if there are hundreds of brands and some brands are cheap, how are some brands so expensive and some brands so cheap, right? And that I'm sure some of you will have that question. Uh, The answer to that question is that typically the cost of ingredients and the manufacturing cost of any medicinal product is quite low. It's only a fraction of the price that it is sold in the market at. If you look at it, there are different costs that go into what builds the MRP of a product, right? One is ingredients and manufacturing cost. Then there is supply chain cost, because the product wherever it is manufactured, it has to be brought to where people are and where people buy them from, right? Then there are marketing costs, right? Like I mentioned, many of these branded products are marketed to doctors through big pharmaceutical marketing representatives. Then there are educational initiatives that these pharma companies run, big educational initiatives. Last but not the least, there are a lot of incentives that these pharma companies have for various stakeholders. Uh, Now, in case of most of the prescribed medicines, there are all of these cost elements, marketing, educational initiatives, incentives, and they take up most of the cost of the medicine. Whereas, if you could essentially, and this is what we do as a company in Isomeds, we identify very painstakingly identify medicine brands which don't really spend so much on marketing, education initiatives, and incentives, right? And because of that, we are able to identify products which essentially cost significantly lower, and that is why we are able, that is why they can be offered to customers at a much cheaper cost in general. Uh, some examples here, let's say there is somebody who buys pen 40. I think most people buy pen 40 for gas or acidity related issues. uh, Pan 40 essentially the salt composition is called pantoprazole 40 milligram. There are about 3,246 brands available in the market, right? And you would see there are names that I have put up, some brands that I have put up. Uh, there's a product called Pantosec from Cipla, which is one of the larger top pharmaceutical companies in India. That product can be offered, at 5 rupees per tablet, compared to what the typically prescribed brand Pan 40 uh, is sold at, which is at around 11.3 rupees per tablet, right? In this case, one could essentially save 55% on these medicines. And and like like you see, these substitutes have exactly the same composition, strength, form, effect, have same testing standards, same regulatory approvals, just that it's a different brand from a different company, that too from a top pharmaceutical company. And one could potentially save so much on their medicines with PAN 40, right? I'll just give you a few more examples. Glycomed GP2, I'm sure a lot of diabetes patients take Glycomed GP2. There are alternative brands of Glycomed GP2 as well, like you see here. Glycomed GP2 is a combination of glimepiride 2 milligrams and 500 milligram. There are about 292 brands in the market, right? And the Glycomed GP2 costs around 11.9 rupees per tablet, whereas Daily Glim, which is a product from a company called Leaford, again a large pharma company, it could cost around 5.1 rupees per tablet, right? And one could potentially save 57% on this. Telma 40, a lot of cardiovascular condition patients will have Telma 40. Telma 40 typically costs around 7.5 rupees per tablet. There are a lot of brands. There are 1,297 brands available in the market. There's a brand called Tell Me Work from a large pharma company called Work Hard. That could essentially be offered at 3.4 rupees per tablet, right? Saving patients around 69% on this. One last example I'll go with, which is Rojuva's 40. Again, it's a medicine for cardiovascular condition. Typically in the market, it'll cost around 43 rupees per tablet. There's a product called Roju Best 20 by Cadila Pharmaceutical, which is again a large pharmaceutical company. That could be offered at around 10 rupees per tablet, right? Saving around 76% on this medicine. So these are just a few examples. Similarly, almost all medicines, prescribed medicines, not the OTC products or nutraceuticals, but the prescription medicines, most of the medicines have similar alternative brands available in the market, which have exactly same composition, strength, form, effect, have same testing standards, have same regulatory approval, but can be offered at a much cheaper, much affordable price. Uh, Now, what it really leads to is a significant savings, and I just want to show that example as well. Here's a bill of an individual with a cardiovascular condition, right? Now, this individual, if you look at this, there are four medicines that the person takes on a regular basis. Uh, Person has a monthly medicine bill of 2,933 rupees, right? And with our recommendations, which are for with alternative brands that we're recommending, you could potentially get medicines from high big pharma companies, and save 78% in this bill, right? And which essentially means an yearly savings of 27,420 rupees. It's not a small amount. For most families, 27,000 rupees is a significant amount. And such a saving is just possible by being a little more aware and by using platforms like Isomeds. Uh, Today, with these kind of concepts, we are helping thousands of chronic condition patients reduce their bills by anywhere between 50 to 70% savings. We have these are some of our customers. You have thousands of these people who kind of benefit from the services that we provide. Uh, so as a company, we are really focused on helping chronic condition patients cut their monthly medicine bills by 50 plus percentage. We are based out of Bangalore. We have a physical pharmacy as well in Vijayanagar in Bangalore. At the same time, we have free home delivery available for orders through phone or WhatsApp. One could order online as well. We have a website called isomeds.in. One could potentially go there and find savings for their medicines and order with that as well. Isomeds I am the founder and the CEO of Isomeds. We have uh, Dr. Ravindranath Kunjindai, who is a medical advisor that we have. Ravi has been a colleague of mine in Biocon, and he was the chief medical advisor at Biocon as well. Uh, and then I have Vipin, who is also a co-founder of mine, and Vipin had worked at Amazon, P&G, and is an alumni of IIM Lucknow. So we have a great team with a great mission, and we are here to help chronic condition patients cut their medicine bills significantly and helping them live a really healthy life. That's my presentation.
The journey to wellness is for everyone. Thank you so much, Abinash, for sharing such valuable insight with us. Your deep expertise and practical solutions have certainly given us a lot to think about when it comes to navigating the delicate balance between medicine price and quality. On behalf of Vayah Vikas, we are truly grateful to you and to all our participants for joining us in this important conversation. We hope today's session has empowered you with practical knowledge on how to access affordability, high quality medicines without compromising your health. As we heard, making informed choices can not only ease financial burdens but also ensure better health outcomes for you and for your loved ones. If you have further questions or would like to explore more resources on this topic, please feel free to reach us at Vayah Vikas. We are always here to support you in your health journey. Once again, thank you all for your time and participation. Stay safe, informed, and take care. Thank you.
Thank you.